Hey everybody, it's What the Flick, and our first discussion of the Knick, Steven Soderbergh show on Cinemax, the network that brought you Banshee.
Banshee, yes.
Which I dig. This is Clive Owen as some sort of doctor. Surgeon, I believe is the word they use.
Surgeon, deputy chief of surgery.
Do we have a clip?
We live in a time of endless possibility. From such humble beginnings through the astonishing modern world in which we now live. More has been learned about the treatment of the human body in the last 5 years than was learned in the previous 500.
Method and Madness? The
Method and Madness.
Yes. So the pilot episode. So, you know, if the show is wildly successful, right? So we're introduced to the character we're supposed to root for. You talked about this right before we shot the show, when you were talking, because you're catching up on The Wire and West Wing, and you have all these, I'm so envious, you have all these great shows to watch. And we were throwing shows out at you, and you're like, you have to like someone before you can be ambivalent about them. You know, but the arc that Tony Soprano brought in 1998. I don't know that it, like, what's to like about Clive Owen right now, except for the fact that he's, you know, Clive Owen, he's super handsome.
Cocaine injected into his dick. Yeah. That's what I like about him.
And he's a racist.
I think they're going to make him vulnerable. I think that that's what they're really keying up, is that he's struggling, he's sick. There was that one scene where
he's got the DTs.
Yeah, and the nurse comes in and he shows her. He doesn't tell her to go away. He asks her for her help. And I think that that's going to be the Clive Owen that they develop.
And obviously, you know, his mentor dies at the beginning of this episode, and clearly that was a long-standing relationship. I think Dr. Christensen really meant a lot to...
But they didn't make it seem that way in those first few scenes. At first I thought they didn't like each other, and only in the rest of the episode did I realize, oh, that was his mentor who he looked up to and loved.
Because I felt like after the botched surgery, he was trying to say, like, he said this operation failed, you did.
Procedure failed. And he said, thank you, my friend, but I'm with Cara. Up until that moment, I wasn't sure they were great friends.
Yeah.
Well,
but they clearly were.
And that's why, I mean, Steven Soderbergh, I think what he's trying to make you, he doesn't want you to root for somebody. He wants you to root for modern medicine. So I think that's you know, he's been often called out for being kind of like cruel toward characters in his movies, and maybe not the most emotional of directors. And he's doing some of that here. I mean, you're not like getting warmth from the show, but you're getting an incredible vibe of like what it took probably to make advancements in medicine.
Yeah, and we talked about time and place in Masters of Sex, and I think very much that's going to be this show about just like, well, this was 1900, and how did we all not die then? You know?
What a great stat he throws out when he at Earth's worst eulogy. But I mean, so 20 years early, so 1880, a man would live to be 39, and now it's 47 in 20 years, if that's true, and I presume that's probably researched and probably true.
Yeah, we've made so many advances in medicine, yet they're still not wearing gloves and they don't have antibiotics.
Yeah, but they're washing their hands now. That was a huge thing.
Well, they're dipping their beard into soapy water, alcohol.
And that was Matt Frewer, by the way. If anybody, that was Max Headroom. If you didn't know.
Who did what?
Who's Dr. Christensen?
That's who's in Orphan Black. Right. Which is why I knew he was in Orphan Black.
Which is another show I have to watch because everybody calls me Cosima.
Yeah, you'll see it.
I gotta
like
watch
you won't
that.
even.
I gotta see that too.
The Gore. Should we talk about the Gore?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, the gore is intense in this show, but I think rightly so. I mean, there's a lot of. I'm so used to gore now from shows like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead that it really just kind of like just goes past me. I don't care. But this show really made me think about the meaning of. I mean, you see the knife going into the belly for a reason. It is the shot that tells you what did it mean to actually see if something worked by testing it on a live human being.
Right.
Cut somebody open.
Yeah, to cut somebody open. And I think, you know, people were complaining, and there's been complaints about the gore. I don't think they're quite grasping that there's a purpose to all this.
I agree. It's not the same kind of gore as Game of Thrones.
It's not even the same kind of gore as like other hospital shows.
Or Hannibal.
Or Hannibal, right.
That's true. One of my favorite Twitter kind of avalanches that came after the Knick was from my friend Sarah Benincasa, who's a comedian, and her Twitter's really funny, so you should follow her. And it was just a lot of like, I'm starting to watch the Knick, and oh my God, the horror, the blood, all of the blood and the cocaine. And it's just tweet after tweet after tweet. But the funny thing is, and it's really a bloody, bloody show. For me personally, my background is in science. I made a living opening up animals and using their tissues and learning from them. And this kind of quote unquote gore does not faze me at all. It's surgery, and it's so well done, it looks like surgery.
The way when the pumping of the blood by that other guy, and they're like, put your back into it.
Yeah.
And then moving the bottles to like just filling that one up and filling that one up.
The whole time they're doing this, that
I thought something was happening. I went outside to my house.
It was.
I did. I thought the sprinklers
And
were
this
on or
is something
something.
you don't even realize. This
Right.
is where there's not that much exposition, where you don't even think about it until you realize, oh, it's a foot-pumped vacuum, because they didn't have electricity.
Right.
And only at the end of the episode are they showing that they're going to finally install lights in the hospital.
Yeah,
Well,
it's like
also-
there's those racks of candles you see in the
So
operating
how did
room.
But
they-
also finding out that like no one, they've never done a successful C-section.
Oh,
like
for
it's,
12.
I know
Right.
you're seeing a C-section done, and then when the patient dies and the baby dies, you're like that's horrible. Then you find out, oh,
But that's what happened.
it hasn't. No one's survived this operation
So in
yet.
a sense, the way they do things with no electricity and no gloves, the fact that they went from 39 to 47 in those 20 years is amazing.
Yeah.
James Garfield, who was elected in 1880, took office in 1881, was shot by Charles Guiteau that year, and then had a 100% survivable wound. But the doctors went in there and they gave him gangrene because they were like, man, what the hell? He was the president, in 1881.
He got the good doctors.
Like he might, granted they still didn't have gloves, but they were washing, and so like 10 years later he might have lived, and we never would have had a President Chester Arthur.
There's a famous story in neuroscience about Phineas Gage, who was this railroad worker who got a railroad spike through his head, and it was around this time, around turn of the century. He lost his frontal lobe. He gave himself a frontal lobotomy. It went through his cheek, through his head. It was like a tamping iron that was about 7 feet tall and this big around. And he lived for like 20 years afterward, or maybe it was only 10 years, with all these personality changes. He's a huge case study in neuroscience. He died of a bacterial infection.
Right.
That's how you died. You would get the surgery, and whether it was soon or later, you had this invasive bacteria from the surgery itself. And I love that one of the patients in this episode, they were showing us that.
Right.
They had the guy who had the resected bowel,
Sepsis.
and he got sepsis. And that was more commonly what they were dealing with than the actual invasive wounds.
And it turns out also that if you put your pregnant belly into ice, it does make the baby turn over.
It can.
Did you look that
I
up?
Googled it. Like, it's midwives still do that. It doesn't always work, but it is
But
a
it could
thing.
maybe shock the baby into
Now they
moving a
don't-
little bit.
Right, so that's interesting. I figured that had to be a thing that was done.
Well, I figured it was a thing then, but no, they still do
to
it.
get away from the cold. Baby wants to.
But also the non-surgicals. Like, I love the idea that like the people who bring in the bodies, like there's competition between like
the ambulance drivers.
The ambulance driver characters are just great.
But also, how much of a commentary is this 1900 hospital that is desperate to turn a profit, that is incredibly corrupted by the ambulance drivers? Who else was taking money?
Oh, the health inspector. There's a lot of
inspector.
Nurse Jackie in this show.
Right, but I mean,
Actually.
now we see with the CCA and all that crap that Rick Scott does in Florida, and with his company, that the privatization of healthcare. But I mean, it's happening right here.
they get
at
the more of the
1900.
for-profit thing.
Yeah.
Completely. That's. I mean, they took TB patients and they're like, you don't want a fucking TB patient. They were like asking for TB patients.
Yeah,
which is
because the
insane.
city would pay them.
Exactly.
Even though they would do just as well at home.
Yeah, it was.
Oh God,
and
when
they're
the
just gonna
little
infect
girl, as you're
everybody
going to be
else.
late for your shift.
Oh,
I
yeah,
know,
the factory
I know.
worker who was like 11 years old.
That was
Yeah.
man.
One of my other
The good old
favorite
days.
things that Sarah, that my friend Sarah tweeted during that, while she was watching the Knick, which was 2 days before I watched it. 'Cause she watched it during the actual premiere, which was on Friday.
Right.
Yeah, and I watched it. Maybe I watched it on Saturday. Not important. She tweeted something like,
What time Saturday?
I think it's about 3 p.m.
What were you eating?
She tweeted something along the lines of like, I love that there's also a cunty nun. It's a nun. So I think she's going to start calling her a nunt like throughout the series, which I love.
I love that
But
character.
I really like that cunty nun is being geared up to be this this push back against modern medicine. I think you're going to see a big religion versus medicine
science,
play in this, or religion versus science kind of play in this series, which I'm looking forward to.
I also thought that there was courage in the end, where we're led to believe that when the black doctor's there and he's ready to walk out, he's been given 1,000 reasons to walk out. Obviously, we're on his side. He's been horribly treated, and despite the efforts of the clearly well-intentioned and good hospital administrator, like she's on the right side of history and so forth. But we think we're going to get a moment where they don't know how to do something, and the black doctor is going to save him, and Clive Owen is going to be like, it seemed obvious. Clive Owen's going to be like, oh, all right, well, I guess you are worth something.
Right.
But it's the opposite. Is that guy's like, you're a racist, but that was freaking unbelievable, and I didn't come here to not learn shit, and I'm going to stay. Fuck you. And that was.
And Clive Owen's not the racist you get from other TV shows that want to show racism, kind of like Libby and Masters of Sex, as a side of like ignorant vulnerability
kind of thing.
Clive Owen is just mean.
Oh,
I mean, he's like openly like nasty to the
equal
guy. I mean,
dick.
you're just like, oh my god.
And he's just racist.
He's
He's
just
like,
flat-out
my
racist.
parents were forgiving, but I'm a fucking racist. You know,
I mean,
like
he
there's
practically
no.
snarls at the guy.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh geez.
Yeah, and he's definitely one of those. I mean, and this, again, here comes cynical Cara. I am a bit annoyed with the one-note male lead, which I think we see a lot in television, which is the guy who's so proud and so boisterous and has no humility, and then we find his humility somewhere, and now he's a complicated character for us. I think it's kind of going to go that route with him too. I'm so great. I'm the best surgeon. He's going to always have that, yet I'm also addicted to fucking
I'm a
cocaine.
cocaine addict, and we've first seen me in an opium den.
Yeah,
so,
but
I mean, we've already had a drug addicted, brilliant doctor in house. So I mean, on one level, he's not that different, I guess.
That's true.
So hopefully the show will have more up its sleeve in that respect.
But it would be nice if for once on television I could see a lead male character who's really unsure of himself. It's just not something that is done
I mean,
very
I think as we
often.
go back, I mean, you watched The Wire. I mean, I think that I think
The
we
Wire,
have.
well, yeah, but The Wire did everything right.
It did. The Wire,
You know,
the
it
Wire
did
did everything
everything
right.
right.
But there are those shows are out there.
Well, and Mad Men to some extent, I
Yeah,
do
definitely.
think that he definitely felt weaker than he portrayed, which
Especially
is
this last season,
yeah,
I think, or
which
this
is
current season.
a very common way to portray a
Breaking Bad.
woman, but not a man.
I think you definitely saw it in Breaking Bad
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
All right, we got to go. This was, I think, a successful.
Oh yeah.
a bloody good time.
A bloody good time.
And I've seen the second episode, and
Quick
it's good
question.
too.
Oh, it is right. Robert's seen the
I've seen
second.
the second
and
episode, and
holds
it's
up.
really good, too.
Quick question: score, yay or nay, on the Cliff
Oh,
Martinez music?
I love the score. The
I
score
can't
is-
decide yet if it's
I was like, I'm going to give it a 9.
No, I can't
no.
decide if the music is calling too much attention to itself or if it's a really cool counterbalance
It is
to all the
cool
periods.
counterbalance.
Period
all
piece
the
'cause
way.
It's so
Yeah.
modern.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a bit
yeah.
odd, and for the first 15 minutes of the show, I found myself wondering, is this going to be like a horror show? Like, are they trying to go horror with
Right,
the vibe?
like Penny Dreadful.
Or are they not? So
Did not notice.
seriously,
Never
it
do.
was one of
I
the
never
most
do.
salient things in this
I
episode.
never
I
noticed
think.
The
Next week.
score is
Yeah.
like a bubbling cauldron, like of electronic music, and it's just really
Something drove me outside, so I guess that was part of the
Very
score.
unnerving.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was unnerved, no question. Cara, thank you. We'll be back next week for more of the Knick.